Wonderful recording in progress. So that means we are good to go. So let's good. Let's start with one more week here. Our second week. Last week was the first one, where we started to introduce a little bit of the ideas of the Buddhist path so we can have a happier life. That is the idea of the program, right? It's called the Buddhist Tips for a Happy Life. So we can actually develop those understanding because the Buddhist path is extremely rich, if I have to say. So, but we need to understand because otherwise it can have the possibility of just becoming an intellectual understanding of it, just a more, um, sometimes people ask what is the difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? And the Buddhist path is very clear, this distinction. Knowledge is something that we can accumulate from external things, right? We learn, we listen, we read, and nowadays we go to ChatGPT and we put over there, and then we think we have a lot of knowledge in that sense. But actually, wisdom is something that it comes from our own experience. We actually say on Wednesdays I give a talk, a series of talks that I've been almost a year now, 8 months, to a group in Europe, and we called inner wisdom, developing inner wisdom, because that's what we actually want to develop. We want to develop that not only the knowledge, which is the entrance door, okay, for us to be able to develop that inner wisdom. So that inner wisdom is something that in some ways we all have already, okay? We all have that inner wisdom, but now it's covered. It's confused, is in some ways not kind of like in the open. So we need to uncover that inner wisdom to be able to arise, and to manifest in our lives. So that is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Okay, so wisdom is something that we need to experience by ourselves. It's not something someone can give to us. We can, come here and listen to the blah 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 from this monk here and thinking that we're going to become wise. It's not really true. Actually, you can only become wisdom if you take whatever I'm saying and put into practice and bring it to your own experience, right? Was one of the things that really hooked me in Buddhism when I heard that phrase that the Buddha said, that you should listen to the teachings with that same understanding as if someone is giving you a piece of gold. Think about 2,500 years ago, gold was like, the money at the time. So if people would give you a piece of gold saying, yes, for this service or for this object or, food, whatever you were trading from that, you would really want to make sure that, kind of like gold is tested, is good, is not, it's a good thing or not. So it's the same thing. We should listen to what we are listening to and then really analyze, investigate, test. And how do we do that? With ourselves, with our own experience, with our own wisdom that we have right here and right now. And then we try to check if that is becoming some sort of beneficial content in our minds, right? A beneficial kind of like transformation. And how do we know it's beneficial? I always say two things is what it means, if it is beneficial in Buddhism. Two things, okay, twofold. Means, first thing for us to check if it is beneficial, is it helping me to decrease my negative mental states, my kind of like attachment, my anger, my jealousy, my impatience? Is it these slowly to decrease? Pay attention. I'm saying decrease. I'm not saying that because you're going to listen to this blah, blah, blah for 1.5 hours, and then, ah, ah, and then you're going to say, but Kalden, I'm not becoming better. I still get angry with my partner and my family. And I'm going to say, yes, and you're going to be angry for a long time. But what is becoming is just becoming shorter, or maybe you notice, or maybe you change a little bit. Okay? So that is what we just need to be careful with, not going into the extreme of saying, because I am still a bad person, a bad practitioner, a bad Buddhist, because I am still, getting angry with these people. Yes, you're going to still become angry because you have the habit to be angry, right? So that takes time. So that is important, very important that we understand. So this is the first aspect of seeing if something is beneficial for you, is decreasing that, okay? Also, we can see if it is decreasing what we call our self-cherishing or our egocentric, kind of like ego-centered type of approach in life. If sometimes, you think, as one of my teachers used to say, now we 100% of the time think about me, myself, and I. Maybe you think about 99.9% of the time. That's already better than 100%, isn't it? It's already better. So then we just take and just check that, okay? So then sometimes you just think about the other person and someone, or, if you think that, then it's beneficial in the sense of Buddhism, in the sense of Dharma, okay? Practice of Dharma. And then the other fold part of it is, are you also becoming kinder? Are you becoming more loving? Are you becoming more compassionate? Are you becoming, but also, again, one of the aspects of here, are you doing that with a certain level of wisdom? Okay? Not, we're going to talk maybe, I think, in 2 or 3 classes about stupid compassion. We are not talking about stupid compassion, okay? Just like, ha 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 ha, ha, yes, oh, now I'm becoming very good Buddhist. Ha 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 ha. Yes, I speak low like this. Everybody, I'm a doormat. Not like this, okay? Not like this. This is not Buddhism. This is not Dharma. This is completely, forget about it. Someone comes and say, oh, yes, I'm a Buddhist. I am compassionate. Oh, yes, oh, poor little dogs. You go to India, or to Nepal, and there's dogs all the time on the street and all of that. Oh, poor dogs. Oh, no, we need to do something. Oh, no, no. And then there's someone, that goes, and you're driving in New York or somewhere, and then someone cuts in front of you, and this person, no, this person doesn't become, I'm not, this person is bad, blah, blah, blah. Then no Dharma practice, right? Or some politicians do crazy things and then we become very angry. They did that to me. Then doesn't. Okay? So that is when we start to really recognize if something has benefited us. Okay? So this is a very important distinction, because when we talk about benefiting sentient beings, when we're talking about, really developing something that is going to benefit others, it's something that we are checking if it is decreasing our self-cherishing, decreasing our negative emotions, and increasing those positive qualities. Okay, that is very important, that that is clear to us, because otherwise we get lost into this idea of like, oh yes, I'm doing all of these to benefit sentient beings, and then we think benefit sentient beings, it's only, look at this, I'm putting this word over there, only to give food, to give shelter, to give medicine, to give, like nice things, or say nice things. That's not only what benefit is in Buddhism. This is good, it is important, but that's not the entire goal. Okay? The goal needs to come with the idea of helping others and helping ourselves to decrease and eventually eliminate, okay, our self-centered, our egoistic, our negative emotions, and to increase until we are unconditional and unlimited our good qualities. Okay? So we go slowly, step by step. We are kind of like, I don't know you guys. You guys are amazing practitioners, long time practitioners. Me, baby Buddha, baby Buddhist, so I don't know anything. So, but slowly we go developing these kind of like mental states. Okay? So that is why it is important. So that's why when we were discussing this last week, we were discussing in the sense of understanding the concept of the mind. Because all of these that we want, remember we talk a lot about that, what we really want, what moves us, right? What moves us in our life, what actually makes us want something in our life, is that wish to be happy and to not suffer and to not have dissatisfaction. That is what moves us. Everything. Everything that you do in your life, everything that you do with your body, speech, and mind is based on that wish. Hmm? And because of this is the wish, therefore, we need to understand how the mind works. Why? Because we are looking for happiness and we are looking for the absence of suffering outside of ourselves. That's how we are right now. Everything outside looks shining and shining like a diamond. What is this music? There's a music, so shining like a diamond, that's what we are looking for. We are trying to get all of that and thinking, wow, this is gonna be the next, kind of like job, the next relationship, the next day. And we do even that with Buddhism. The next teachings, the next initiation, the next retreat. Maybe when I become monk or nun, okay, I cut the hair, then I'm gonna be happy, then I'm gonna find that. That's what we do. But if we approach like this, we are running towards disaster, towards completely disaster, because it's not gonna be there, because it's the mental state, is a mental state which can develop and what it can really bring about that happiness, that lasting, true, completely full and completely fulfilling experience of happiness that we actually want. And not only we want, but we deserve it. Don't forget that. Okay? We deserve to find a happiness that is completely all encompassing, not going away and staying with us forever. That is the happiness of enlightenment. That's what we want. Okay? So that is very important that we understand that, so we can start understanding the mind. So we need to really observe the mind. And we talked about in last week how the mind, in and by itself, the nature of it is already perfect, right? It's already clear, it's already vast, it's already open. However, now it's covered, you know? It's covered with those kind of like clouds that we believe, truly believe, completely. No zero, 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 zero. Kind of like we can try, no, 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 but we truly believe that the clouds are our experience, right? They are our reality, they are our lives. So we forget about it. We forget about what we call, the clarity of the mind. We forget about that. We forget that the mind is actually more like a future. Events, situations, they will happen. And the events and the situations by it themselves, let's say they are neutral, okay? Why? Because it depends on the mind, the way that the mind is experiencing that moment, then the experience for ourselves will be different. So that's why we need to understand and to learn how to control our minds. Because otherwise, what happens is that possibility, that potential that we have inside of ourselves of connecting with that clarity, with that spaciousness, with that openness, it's going to be completely decreased. It's completely going to be, kind of like restricted to these mental states that is absolutely kind of like, making us suffer. Okay? And we don't want that. We don't need that. But then, if our mind is clear and open like the sky, why we don't feel peaceful? And that's what we need to really observe. And today we're going to talk about really trying to understand why we feel anxious, excitement, disappointed, proud, why we have attachment, and anger, and all of these things. Actually, instead of being like a calm, peaceful place, our minds are more like a roller coaster, isn't it? I think that's a bit more of what it actually is. The morning we come and then we go down and then we go up and then we go down and then we go up. And then sometimes we are in this kind of like everything is amazing and we're thinking we got it. Wow, life is great. And then, we are in this and then suddenly, boom, something happens. Someone says something, something goes wrong one day after another. And then the mind starts to breathe. Do you recognize that? Yes? Are we communicating? Do you understand that? Good, because that is not that like, what I'm saying. You need to understand from your experience. And then we start to really check. We start to really see how the mind becomes completely, I'm going to say, I'm gonna use a, one of the things that you guys need to understand when I'm giving these talks is that I also have a tendency to, kind of like in um, how can I say, in a nice way. I start to say some words or some things about ourselves that maybe we don't like to talk, to see, because that means that actually, if we really look into our minds in this roller coaster, we are a little bit nuts. That's what we are. If you think about it, we have zero control of our minds. We think we have it. We are like, no, 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 no. I have everything under control. Especially like, I know. I understand, but not me. Yes, Kalden, everybody's like this, but I know how to control my mind. I know what I need. I know how to put boundaries, limits. I know everything. Like, we have those kind of like ideas. And then we are crying. I remember a friend of mine, she went to do a Vipassana retreat. And then, in the Vipassana, they have these audios that they kind of like, Vipassana is a 10 days meditation retreat, very hardcore, from 4 in the morning to 10 in the evening, you're meditating. And it's kind of like from Goenka, which was an Indian master, and he had a Buddhist background, but he stopped, as I like to say, into the mindfulness aspect of meditation. And then, but they have these recordings of the teachings of Goenka, from the 70s or 80s. And he's talking about suffering and suffering and suffering. And then my friend, she said, I couldn't understand. I don't have this suffering. My life is great. I have everything. I have a beautiful husband. I have a good job. I have this. I have that, blah, blah, blah. And she was super happy, and she left. And then one day we went, and then she was crying so much. And she said, oh, I have this horrible day at work and blah, 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 blah. And I said, oh, there you go. Now you can see the suffering. I'm very naughty because she didn't want to hear that. But I said, that is the good time for you to notice the suffering. And then she was like, it's true. I have no control of my mind, right? So we need to really acknowledge that. And that is not a weakness. That is actually our best thing, because if we acknowledge that we don't have control, that means we can start going towards developing, that understanding. So that is important, that we understand that the problem is not because of, the clarity of our minds and all of that. It's because we identify with the clouds and these emotional roller coasters that we have, right? We identify with our thoughts, with our feelings, with the symptoms of these clouds that are happening. They're kind of like making our minds busy. So what we're going to really try to see today is to try to recognize what we call the main clouds, I'm going to call it like this, that really create that disturbance in our minds, okay? So in the Buddhist terms, we use it is like these teachings are not kind of like, yes, where these lists came from and all of that. They're not random, but they are actually very deep and in some ways psychological aspects of our ordinary mind, or our untrained and nuts mind, that we can observe. It's almost kind of like the menu. You go to a restaurant and they have like kind of like the main dishes. It's kind of like this. It's the main dish of our minds. As you know, I'm always going to talk about food and make examples with food. So so it's like the main dish of our minds is this kind of like what we call the 8 worldly concerns. Okay. They are also considered what we call four pairs. Okay, so they are 4 pairs. They are the 8 worldly concerns, but they are considered also 4 pairs. What does it mean? It means that they all come with one hope, let's say, and one fear, or one attachment and one aversion towards something. And why it's important for us to understand them is to recognize them in our lives and see what is the center of what is disturbing our minds and not allowing us to connect with that peace and clarity and spacious of our minds. Yeah? It's kind of like try to recognize the cloud for the cloud. Does it make sense what I mean? So that is important, that we understand that by recognizing and learning about them, we will start to say, oh, wow, 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 that is the roller coaster. The roller coaster is because I'm completely under the influence or controlled by the eight worldly concerns. Yes? So that is why it's so important. And if you want, because like today we are not able to cover everything in depth, but there is a special book from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and my favorite book. I read this book at least once a year because I'm a very bad practitioner. But it's like and these book it kind of like gives me it's my cold bucket, cold bucket of cold water like this in top of me. So it's called How to Practice Dharma. It's a book from Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Very special, very, very special, because it talks mainly about the eight worldly concerns. So, after these blah 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 today, if you want to really go deep, yeah, this is good. But be prepared. Be prepared to realize how your mind is completely nuts, and most of the things that you do are just based, contained by these eight worldly concerns. Yes? So let's go start exploring a little bit of them, really trying to understand, how these four pairs they work. In each pair, as I was saying, there is an attachment. No, something that we are really hope for, excited, and we really crave and want to have. And the adverse, or the opposite, the kind of like the um what we really don't want, or the aversion past that we don't want, the opposite of it, which makes us fearful or anxious about. So understanding that makes us understand how our mental energy is completely consumed by chasing, these four good or four attachments, and how we are running away, running from this bad, kind of like aversion types of mental states. Okay, so this is what steals our peace of mind. This is what actually makes our minds be completely glued to these, and identified with these clouds, right? So let's look at the four pairs. So the first one is really, really, really kind of like, for me, the easiest one, which is our attachment for sensory pleasures. Okay? That's good. Very easy. That is our life. Everything in our lives, all the capitalism is based on that. If you think about it, right? Everything is, the first one is the attachment to sensory pleasures, to good food, to comfortable surroundings, to good music, to pleasant touch, to good smells, right? Isn't it? It's we're all the time chasing that. And if you think about it, really think about it, if you can kind of like go a little bit back and observe your mind, what is your daily concerns of what you need, to do in your life from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to sleep, you're going to check how we are constantly looking for this, right? The next sensory pleasure, the next kind of like, nice, if you think about it, Instagram is based on that, the next new thing that I want to see, or perfume that I want to smell, or the music that I want to listen. Is that what we are doing? Go to take the subway, from like Brooklyn to Broadway, and then you're gonna see everybody on the subway with their phones, right? What they are looking for is, they are looking for sensory pleasure. They're looking for something, either a song, either like something to see. They are just engaging into that again and again and again, and that is easy. That is, I think, is the easiest one in some ways. And then what is the opposite of it? The pair of it is the aversion to unpleasant experiences, pain, discomfort, bad smell, annoying noises, bad food, isn't it? how many I always like, sometimes people are very kind, when I'm in Florida, like Deb and all of these nice people from Thubten Kungalin, that they invite me sometimes. And then when I go to Florida, they invite me to have lunch, or food and all of that. And some people we go to a cafe, to a coffee place, to take a coffee and cappuccinos, something like this. And then comes, and then someone says, oh, but it's a little bit cold, it's not as hot, and the milk is not half milk and half this and now that, and we can see how we immediately, because it's a little bit out of what we have, the attachment to the pleasure that we were expecting. If it is specific a little bit, we have the aversion of the discomfort of the no and the bad, and we immediately starts to get something, right? Do you understand? Can you see that? That we do that, or discomfort of kind of like, something is not the way, or now when I travel from, I did Kathmandu, Delhi, then I went to Europe, and then in Europe I came to Brazil. So many flights. And I could see some people really complaining about the flight. Because this, or because this person, because of that, because of this. The mind goes in so many ways. Wow, 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 wow. So much aversion to discomfort. Or the noise. Wow. And I love the idea of song and music. Think about it. Music is something that is so subjective, but the moment that is playing a music that we don't like, we immediately get averted and say, this music, these loud people, this da da da. But if it was the music we like, oh, so nice, so good. So it's easy to see these ones, how this is constantly in the back of our minds, right? And we are constantly chasing and kind of like, making sure that kind of like, that those experiences, these unpleasant experiences will not happen to us. So we do so many things, right? We have tried so many things. So, so we have first that attachment or that hope that the delicious meal, the comfortable chair, that the perfect vacation, and we're gonna fantasize about the next like place we're gonna visit and the next time, or oh wow, the pilgrimage. I said to these with the people for the pilgrimage, they were like, they were so excited, and I said, no, 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 no. Don't start about that, because he's going to have a lot of problems. Many things are not going to work out. We're going to India and Nepal. We're going to have a lot of discomfort. So drop that. Drop the eight worldly concerns, right? And actually just try to be aware of the situation, right? Without the hopes and the fears, okay? So that is the idea that we really need to observe, that this is consuming ourselves. And because it's consuming ourselves, we are not in contact with the peace and stillness of our minds. Yes? Does it make sense? So it's stealing our peace of mind, because it's making us either go into the excitement of the attachment and the next vacation. Oh, I'm going to Hawaii and I'm going to, to Tahiti and all of that, and or we're gonna go, no, I don't need to, I don't want to go this place, it's very bad, I don't want to do this. So these two things are both there, moving the mind and like really disturbing the mind. Okay, so this is very important, because especially on observing how our aversion to unpleasant experiences, especially now more and more because of our constant what we call dopamine rush that we are looking, that we are having, we are becoming more and more, what is the word we use to say, less resistance, to these discomforts, right? We are kind of like, we're losing that ability yeah, okay, things are a little bit discomfortable, uncomfortable, but we're gonna go through it, right? I don't need to immediately like chase something so that discomfort. So this is happening more and more because of our, as I call, immediate. We have Instagram and Insta food and Insta date and Insta everything, right? So this Insta kind of like chasing of what we kind of like a craving for sensory pleasures is in some ways also affecting what we call, yeah, what we call that kind of like a less resistance or it's not resistance, there's another word that may be better, for dealing with the with the unpleasant situations, the discomfortable situations. So observe that. Try to observe that in the mind and to see how these really takes, your kind of like your peace of mind. Because then, our minds are constantly scanning the environment, the situation. Oh, this feels good. This is better. Oh no, I should do this. Oh no, this is good, so I should go close to this person, this thing. Oh yes, we go and they say, oh, this is the best. We go to a restaurant and say, oh, this is the best seat, this is the best table. Oh yes, this is that, all like this. Think about it. We're completely nuts. This is completely consuming us, right, all the time. So I'm already insulting everybody. So that also helps sometimes, when I call everybody nuts, but it's okay. I'm included in this, so then it's okay. So this is the first pair, okay? The second pair is something about a little bit more, how can I say, more not superficial, but it's what we call gain and loss, right? This is more than related to possessions, to having things. And that, especially in America, it's very easy to see that we are constantly with that, right? Constantly with that attachment, that hope that if I have the next car, the new iPhone 17, when I have that, and all of these needs that we start to create, right? It's just like absolutely. Now in the pilgrimage, we had a guide, one of the guides, and he was always with the same clothes, right? And sometimes it was actually warmer, sometimes it was actually colder. But the only thing that he would do is he had this jacket and then he would just put the jacket a little bit down like this. And that was it. And us, we had three different layers and we had these kind of like hot this and then that and then the hat and then this and then base layer, then we have a fleece and then we have this. So we all constantly kind of like looking and thinking that we need all of these different possessions, these different kind of like material things in order to bring what we actually need, right? That happiness, that hope for that will bring satisfaction and happiness, isn't it? Yes, that is very easy to see how we are constantly attached to these, to receiving possessions, money, stuff, right? And at the same time, we have the aversion of not receiving them, okay, not being able to buy them, or we are afraid, we are anxious about losing what we have. It's like we are very happy to give things away when we have something new that we already like or replace, right? It's kind of like, or is not useful anymore for us, right? It's not that we kind of like we are those kind and generous people that say, oh yes, oh I'm gonna, yeah, but now I'm not using anymore. Or a friend of mine, she's very funny. She does that with her husband. She says, no, but I'm gonna give it away. No, 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 I'm gonna give it away. And then I said, you already have something new to buy instead, right? And she's like, yes. So she kind of like talks to her husband, says, no, 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 I'm going to give these away, no problem. And then she gives the bag away because she already has another one that she likes, like that she wants to go and buy it. So that's a little bit how it works with us, right? It's like we have this aversion to lose something that we think that we have this possession, this thing that is going to bring us, that satisfaction. So therefore, we have aversion to losing it, okay? So it's very important that it's a perfect example, it's like when we go to a shop, to buy the new iPhone 17, you have a question, Anna? Oh, no, no, you just Okay. If you do have a question, please save me, okay? If you need a question, just let me know.
Zoom is on control this time.
Okay.
Sorry, sorry.
It's no problem. But if you do, anyone has a question, just stop me, okay? Save me and just stop me, and then ask the question. But then what we go to an Apple shop, to bring to buy the new iPhone, and then we are seeing the phone and all of that, We haven't bought it yet. We are looking and all of that. And then what happens? Someone just tip it, and then boom, it breaks. And then we say, oh yeah, okay, wow, yeah, wow, this person, is gonna have to pay for that and all of that, blah 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 blah. Second moment, we go, we buy the phone, and it becomes ours. And then someone comes and tips it, and then boom, it breaks. The dragon comes out, and then, same situation, exactly the same. But because we have that kind of like aversion of losing something that we have, that we call it ours, our possession, then we suffer, right? Then there's suffering, there's a totally different experience. So that is very important that we understand that, right? We're always with this anxiety, to check, oh, my bank account, do I have money? Some people go into the bank account like 2 3 times a day just to check, oh, and then we have the investments, and then these and then that, la la la, all of these. So this one is, I think, is also very obvious in our consuming society. Our mind is constantly calculating, what can I get better, what I might lose if I do this. We are constantly in these, gain and loss all the time. It's not is not, and I'm an accountant, so I can say, like, in our lives, we call, in the accounts, we call profit and loss, right? Or gain and loss. That's what it is. That's what we say in the end of the day. That's what we are looking at, the end line, the bottom line of profit and loss, isn't it? So that's what we are actually like thinking about. Yes, Deb, you have a
Um,
question.
yeah, is gain different than pleasure? Because don't we want the iPhone 17 because it would give us pleasure? Or
Is different. It's different because the pleasure, because the sensory pleasure, one of the things, one of the sensory pleasure, because it gives us the sensory pleasure of seeing it, or like being able to listen to music, is more in relation to the senses that is going to have. This is more about a possession, right? Is more that situation of like, it's mine and I have that possession. So I can show that I have more of this. You understand? It's kind of like accumulation of possessions, of gain, of money, of clothes, of stuff. You know. So is that is more the difference between them. Does it make sense? Yes. Okay. Then we're gonna go to the other. So that's the second pair. Yes. So far so good. Yes,
So,
Santia.
Venerable, would you say that gain and loss and attachment and aversion are all different forms of attachment and aversion?
So let's say that the attachment and so the eight worldly concerns, they are different, or the main manifestations of attachment and aversion in our lives. Does it make sense? So that is why I say, I give the idea of the main dish. They are the main dish of our minds, right? These four, that kind of like the four pairs, or these eight worldly concerns. But attachment and aversion is the basis of it. Next week we're going to talk specifically more about attachment, and then about aversion and anger, really the emotions in itself. Here we are just kind of like starting to see them as what they are, right? It's like, oh yes, I can see that. I can see myself kind of like getting attached to these. I can see myself looking at these, having the fear of that. That is what is creating this kind of like, this disturbance in my mind, and not allowing me, right? But then Buddhism is going to say, it's not really the possession and the toys and the things. It's more about the emotion. So we're going to go deeper, right? Each class here, we're going to try to go deeper and deeper, to really dissect. Is that a good word? Dissecting. We're going to dissect the kind of like what I'd like to call the real science of the mind, right? so we can understand why actually Buddhism talks about going to the root of the problem. So now the problems is more the possessions, the things, the sensory pleasures, the days, and then we're gonna go slower, slower. Yeah, does it make sense, Sheila? It helps. Yeah. So so these are the two pairs. Now we're gonna go to the other two pairs, which is something that we don't know. So it's something I'm gonna have to introduce to you. Okay, maybe you don't recognize these things, but our attachment for being attachment to being praised, to have to receive compliments, to be spoken well of. Yes, that is something that is very interesting in our lives. Okay, so here is very important because when we talk about the other one, which is called good reputation, is a bit different than praise. Okay, good reputation is what people think about us. Here is more about, like, when I want to hear that I am a, I did a good job, or I am a good person, or like, please tell me I'm beautiful. It's that idea. It's more about the word. It's like I need to word, I need to receive the compliment, right? Does it make sense? Yes? So this is one of the biggest attachments that we have, right? Attachment to being praised, to being complimented, that's very. And then the other pair, which is the other part, is the opposite of it. The aversion to being blamed, criticized, right? Wow. That is a big one in our lives. We are running away from these in so many ways. So many ways we are kind of like trying to avoid this. And the problem is not that we try to avoid it, it's how and the things we do to avoid that, right? We lie, we do other things, we create so many. I like to say we create a completely huge Brazilian drama about that so we cannot, run away from being criticized or blamed, isn't it? Wow, 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 wow. So that is very important for us to really observe how these are really parts of our lives that are completely, completely consuming us, right? This kind of like, especially being criticized, the fear of what people are saying about you, replaying that small criticism, in our head for hours and days, and oh, because that person said this to me, and that said that, and then you just, you know wow. I remember a situation in one place as well that I said, oh, I would like to invite this person, and the spec said, no, 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 because 30 years ago that person told me this and blah, blah, blah. And I said, ah, that's what we do. We kind of like, we really grasp, to this in some ways, right? So we have so much anger and aversion toward that we almost grasp towards that kind of like aversion. You understand what I mean by that? Yes? We kind of like, we are having aversion towards what people said to us, but we grasp to that. Is like, wow, that person said this about me, then we just be a complete. Who is suffering is the person is living their lives, nothing to do with you, not even know that you are feeling all of that, but you are there, like, I'm sorry again to insult everybody, but like a cow, ruminating, nom, 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 the same thing for years, wasting your time, wasting your energy, wasting your life, okay, due to the 8 worldly concerns. And the same with the attachment to this praise, no? We kind of like, "Oh, we want to do this," so then we do things, and then we become sneaky, or we do something just for the boss to compliment us in front of everybody. Or, with that hope that someone will notice how generous and kind and good monk or good Buddhist I am. Right? Or people even give money that they don't have, become kind of like, practice generosity just to be receive a compliment, to receive a thank you at the end. you know and then what happens? People don't say thank you. They completely forget. And then what happens? I get very angry. That's our lives, isn't it? It's a good Brazilian soap opera and drama. It's like that's how it is, the roller coaster of emotions. So that is this very, 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 especially in this time and age, we are really, really. But I feel that in this time and age, and especially for the new generations with social media, the last pair is the most difficult and the most, I think, concerning, the one that we are really concerned, which is the attachment to have a good reputation and the aversion for having a bad reputation, right? That is really something that, you know, attachment to have a good reputation, a good image, a high status, or the aversion to have, I cannot have a bad reputation. No, 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 a bad image. But what think people would think about me, or having a low status, Wow, wow, wow. This consumes us so much, really, Even people that I know that they kind of like maybe cannot even afford living in the same neighborhood, huh? But they cannot kind of like let it go because what people would think if I move, to Brooklyn or to, to no, to Queens, Wow, what will people think about me? So I getting that, a lot of that just to keep that good reputation. Yes. Does it make sense? Yes, you understand? Yeah. So this is consuming our minds. How can we have a peaceful, calm mind if this is what is going on in our minds all day, throughout the entire day? Chasing for this, chasing for that, concerned about this, concerned about that. A completely chaos. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Hmm? So that is why it's important that we start to recognize these things. And especially nowadays with social media, right? I always say that when maybe most of us here we were young, we didn't have social media phones, so the way we would be worried about the reputation would be maybe among our friends at school and maybe the neighbors. But now we are afraid, or we are competing to have a good reputation with the entire world in this thing, here. But not only this, but also we are kind of like competing with an even more illusionary side and aspect of people's lives. Because it's an illusionary aspect because it's just a click or a frame, a shot of something that is not really day-to-day life. Sometimes we would be feeling like this, but then our friends would have a bad day or the neighbors would have a fight, and then we would say, oh, okay, so I'm not the only one. But nowadays in Instagram and all of the social medias, TikTok, everybody's perfect. Everybody has 24 hours. I love, sometimes appears to me these things, come with me to my daily routine, and the person goes every day, wakes up at 5 in the morning, go and do that, and then take a cold bath or whatever these things that they ice bath, and then they go to the gym, and then they have these, and then they take care of the family and all of that. And I say, 24 hours, you do that every single day, 365 days of the week? you know, I always doubt because sometimes we're in a bad mood, sometimes we're not so good, sometimes we're like this. Discipline, is very hard, especially when, so then we start to create these ideas, so we create this good reputation. We sell that we are like this. And then what happens? We chase that. We try to chase that. We try to keep that as the truth. And guess what? We have an uncontrolled mind driving being the pilot of our minds. So most possibly it's going to be very hard to be able to keep that. Especially because we are wanting to be happy and we start to see that those things don't bring the happiness that we want. So then we start to, hit the wall, and as I like to say. So that is very important that we start to really try to understand this hope that people think of us as beautiful, as smart, as successful, as kind, as competent, carefully managing ourselves to look like this. It's actually a prison. a prison that we are creating for ourselves. And exactly the opposite. The anxiety of people discovering we are not like this, we are a fraud, right? The panic of, of a public, of doing mistakes or something like this. We are really, really making ourselves suffer, right? If you think about it. Actually, even our attachments or our hopes, even when we have them, they become a prison. So they don't become happiness. They don't become a source of, wow, now I got it. Why? Because immediately the pair of it comes with it. It's never one thing doesn't come alone. It's like, oh yes, oh I have it success, material success, and then that's it. No, with material success comes the fear of losing that success, right? Of the material point. Oh, with the kind of like good reputation, immediately comes the fear. It comes together. So that's why we call they are the pair. It's almost like two sides of a same coin. They come together. It doesn't come one without the other, right? So that is why it's so important for us to start observing these. So that's why the book is so special, the book of Rinpoche, because Rinpoche goes, and I always say, just put like this, like really press or put it in our faces, how we are actually working and dealing with that in our daily lives. Very important for us to recognize, because as I was saying, recognizing these 8 concerns, gain, loss, pleasure, pain, blame, and praise, reputation, and kind of good reputation, bad reputation, is the operating system, as I like to say, is what the operating system of our crazy, nuts, uncontrolled mind. We are like puppets, puppets, of these 8 words, eight words concerns. They are the strings making us hope and fear and all of that, right? So that is so important, that you try your best to check in your daily life, just start to observe, just to try to pay attention. The reason why these, now we are talking about knowledge. So here we are sharing knowledge. So you are now accumulating that knowledge to do what? To apply to your mind so it can become wisdom. How does it become wisdom? By you checking if this is true. In your daily life. You checking when you kind of like see your mind going towards praise, towards good reputation, towards, sensory pleasure, towards, gain. And then the fear of like, oh no, what people are going to think about me if I don't do that. Oh, if I do. And these, we do it everywhere, even in the Buddhist center, yeah, in the monastery, people do that. Everywhere. So it's important that we recognize it. It's important that we see it, as I like to say, call the state of mind for what it really is, right? If we recognize this state of minds, then we can start really checking and saying, is it really helping me to chase these 8 worldly concerns? The 4, and be hopeful and be fearful of these concerns. Is it? Is it really bringing me peace? Is it really kind of like bringing me in tune and in harmony with the true nature of my mind, of being open and kind and, and spacious and clear, peaceful? Or is the opposite? When I'm under the influence of these mental states, I'm completely like this, disturbed. Yes, Cynthia.
We just had the New York City Marathon in New York.
Okay, yes.
And I was thinking, like, would people do the New York City Marathon and like run for 26.2 miles? Is that they are trying to chase like a sensory pleasure or being praised or have a good reputation for run the New York City Marathon? And
It depends, right? It can be any of these,
because there
right?
could,
It
okay, could it be a
it
combination or none of them at all also?
I think none of all it could be, but then it would be a positive mental state, right? It would be, for example, I'm doing that in order to help others, right? It can be that. Of course, it can be. But I have to say something, and that is why it's become very hard. Because I had this discussion with my mom the other day, and she was not happy with me. Because I said, because we sometimes we have this tendency of thinking that we are extremely altruistic, extremely compassionate and generous, and especially when we put, this kind of like a cloak of being the good Buddhist, then becomes even harder. But sometimes we do put this cloak and we believe that our minds are completely free from the eight worldly concerns. And sometimes what happens is that the real motivation, it's covered by this what we call altruistic kind and all of that. So then I always say, look for the eight worldly concerns. Just check, right? Because if you're doing for none of this, so if nobody notices you, if nobody says anything to you in return, if nobody kind of like gives you anything, if you actually have a suffering experience of that, would you still do it? Right? So it's important for us, and not because for us to then not do anything because like, oh, I'm always like, I can see that everything that I'm doing is in a way contaminated by these mental states. It's just to pay attention. It's just to become aware. And then with wisdom we start to really be able to transform it, right? So becoming aware is the first step for us to be able to say, and one of the things that I always say, honesty on the spiritual path is so important. And being honest about our own eight worldly concerns and how we are slaves of them is the best feeling you might have. Realizing that, I don't need to be this kind of like supposed to be kind and like compassionate and generous person all the time. I can see that this is coming from that. Now I can change that. You understand? Because then what happens is that when we're going to talk about in the next few weeks, we're going to talk about what we call, antidotes for, let's say, attachment, antidotes for anger, for aversion. And I gave a teaching. Deb was there. Deb was very kind because we talked for 3 months. I gave teachings on the 8 verses of mind training. 8 verses. There's only 8 verses, and it took me 3 months to give the teaching. So I'm like a lot of blah blah blah. But in that understanding, why it is so important, because when I was preparing for this class and I received many times, I had the privilege to receive the teachings on that, the text of the 8 verses. But His Holiness the Dalai Lama talked about the manifested emotion. And that is very important. Because if we cover the emotion with this idea of being the kind, the generous, I have to, right? I have to be this, I have to be the kind, I have to be the generous, I have to be the compassionate, I have to, then we are not touching the real emotion that is there. I'm trying to cover the 8 worldly concerns with something that will look good, which will be considered good in the Buddhist idea or even for myself. So then I cannot apply the antidote for the attachment or the antidote for the aversion, because I'm actually dealing in my own mind thinking that I don't have an attachment, So then you cannot use the antidote into the attachment. Does it make sense what I said? Yes, I know I can be very complicated sometimes, but I hope that it's clear what I'm trying to say. Because that's why the 8 worldly concerns, as I say, is the main dish. It's kind of like really checking what is there. Because in some ways, the main dish is always there. You know, it's hard that you go to a place and they say, okay, you have, you know, especially in Europe, I don't know if in America we have that, but you have the menu, you know, you can, the menu, uh, it's kind of like you can go and you have like an appetizer and the main dish, or you can have the main dish and the dessert, you know, it's always like this. But the main dish is always there. So it's that idea, you know, the eight worldly concerns, if you really look, if we really are honest, if we use it honest in our minds, if we kind of like are open without the judgment, but just to really wanting to improve, right? Because we want to be happy. And we understand that these concerns, these kind of like, you know, attachments and aversions, they are stealing our happiness. So wanting to recognize them, wanting to understand them, wanting to transform them, it's actually something that, you know, we should come from that idea. So honesty, courage, you know, to really look into them are very needed in the beginning of the spiritual path when we start to look into that, right? So it's very, 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 very important that we don't try to judge or see it in a bad or wrong, or it's just to check. And then we say, oh, okay, wow, wow, wow. And I thought that I was, you know, free from this. Because that's what happens when sometimes we learn about the eight worldly concerns and we think, oh no, but this is just for the beginners, you know, this is like, oh yeah, but now I don't have this anymore. You know, I'm like now I'm a monk and I'm a spiritual person and I don't have these things, right? That's all normally. Then if you actually start to think, same, you know. I used to work in finance, right? I used to work in a private equity investment banking, you know. And if you think about it, we need to be very careful to not bring the same mental states of the eight worldly concerns, the eight worldly dharmas, into the dharma, the Buddhist path, right? So that's what we are trying to avoid. So that's why we need to understand it. We need to learn. We need to really kind of like, you know, and especially check within ourselves. Okay? Does it make sense, Cynthia? It helps yes? So that is very, 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 very important that we do that, right? That we start to understand that we need to kind of like look into all of these. So, you know, so as you guys know, the homework, there's always homework. So homework for next week is try to, throughout your day, whenever you remember, check about the eight worldly concerns. And just write down. Don't, if it can be like a little note on the phone, if you're like, you know, and say, ooh, just notice me, you know, being kind of like worried or kind of like anxious about being blamed about something at work. Or, oh, I just noticed me being kind of like, you know, attached and kind of like a, you know, craving for praise or craving for a good reputation. Just write down. Just write down. It becomes kind of like some sort of diary, you know, for us to start checking our minds. Then Dharma becomes alive. Then Dharma becomes our life. It's not different. It's not that like, oh, I do when I'm here, listen to blah, blah, blah with Kalden Tuesday evenings, then okay, then I practice Dharma. And then the next day I just go and do everything. You know? That doesn't work. That is the importance that we bring to our life, day-to-day life. I can see here, I can see here, I can see here. And then with time, the more knowledge, the more kind of like, you know, tools that we're going to be developing, you know, we already developed a few tools last week about understanding the mind, about seeing the filters, about that. And then, you know, now we are kind of like understanding another one, taking more tools and saying, oh yes, I can see that. Oh yeah, I can see that. Then, as I like to say, we're gonna the idea of this course is to give you guys tools. And then through your daily life, you know which tool you're going to use here. Oh, here I'm going to analyze, you know, the nature of my mind. Here I'm going to analyze the eight worldly concerns. Here I'm going to analyze, you know, the nature of the attachment, the antidote, you know, like this. That's what we're going to do. Does it make sense? Are we communicating? Yes. Okay. So that is very, very, very good. Any questions, as my mom says, suggestions or opinions or, you know, anything? Yes, Cynthia.
So, uh, been taking Discovering Buddhism. Anna and I've been taking Discovering Buddhism,
Very good.
and
With
um,
Gus.
with Gus.
Is he better? Is he feeling better because he was a bit sick last week or something?
I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. Good.
Yeah. And the the oh no, my battery's running low. So the eight worldly concerns came up in the death and rebirth module.
Mhm.
And is that because like your sensory pleasures go away when you're dying and like you can't take your stuff with you and you
Mm.
have to give up your stuff and you get afraid of people like forgetting about you and not talking about you?
There's many ways we can see that, but it's mostly because it's to say that um, we we don't think about death and impermanence, right? And the main reason why we don't think about it is because we are completely obsessed with the eight worldly concerns.
Okay.
They are the main hindrance for us to see things as they are, for us to really approach things in the sense that they are impermanent, that things will finish, right? Think about it. Think about it. If you really would think that if you would have that wisdom within yourself, okay, so I'm using the word wisdom because we discussed today what the difference between knowledge and wisdom. If you would have that wisdom of understanding death and impermanence, do you think you really would be ruminating because someone said something to you that it's like was a criticism or something like this? You probably wouldn't, right? It just wouldn't be so important, right? Because you know that things are gonna finish and then this is not gonna be important. Or would you really spend so much energy, time, money with craving for the new iPhone or the better this, the better that? If you know that when you go, when you die, a coffin doesn't have a wallet or doesn't have kind of like a bag, you don't bring anything with you, right? If you really understand that, then you would like lessen more and more and more and more and more and don't let it go. This is one of the main antidotes, right, for especially attachment, right? The meditating on impermanence and death.
Okay.
So that is why they are connected, is that idea to really bring, because when we talk about the the lamrim in some ways, the really the path, then when we come and talk about that, we start to talk about yes, because of impermanence and death, is so important. Why is so crucial? Because if I don't think about that, I am not going to transform my mind onto understanding, and letting go of, what we call the eight worldly concerns. Therefore, I'm not going to practice Dharma. If in my mind I'm 100% 24 hours concerned with the eight worldly concerns, there's no way to practice Dharma. Right? Because I'm just chasing them again and again and again. Yeah, does it make sense? It helps.
Yes.
Thank you, dear. Any more questions or doubts or considerations? My mom also saying, let people like say something without making a question. Okay, yeah, so I allow this every day. So if not, as you know, I don't think, I like to keep it a little bit shorter than 1.5 hours, so you don't stay looking at the screen for so long in the evening, and also because I don't want to talk too much as well. So, so the homework, everybody's clear with the homework? Yes. The homeworks are very important, not because you need to think, oh, because Kalden is going to ask me what to do next class or anything like that. Not like this. But for you, it's like it's your meditation. Yeah? It's kind of like is you bringing your mind. What meditation means? Familiarization. That's the definition of meditation, right? So meditation means familiarizing with that topic. So having that homework means, oh, I'm gonna try to keep that familiarization in my daily life, right? So meditation can become something that is not just sitting down and then I need to meditate and think. And no, in your daily life you go and then you have your phone and then you just click in your mind and say, ooh, I can see me going here towards blame, towards, like afraid of being blamed about this, afraid of kind of like not getting a good reputation, I'm afraid of losing my material things, so I don't want to give the money or give these to that person, right? So just use it as a way to familiarize yourself with what's going on in your mind. That is the idea of the homework. So that's why it's kind of like it's not a chore. It's actually a, a wow, so nice that now we have that, right? That we have that new tool. So let me put it to use. So I can check if this is the best tool, or maybe it's like this, or maybe it's like that, or this, like what it is. So that is the idea. Does it make sense? Yes? Okay. You are all very, very kind for being here, for coming and, staying, stopping doing everything that you're doing to come here and to listening to these and to share and to have these wonderful questions. So thank you so much for being here. And everything that we've learned, everything that we kind of like contemplated, that that we are kind of like thinking and really, investigating. Let's make sure that we use these to bring benefit. Remember? So now benefit in that sense, in the sense of decreasing our self-cherishing, decreasing our negative emotions, and increasing our positive emotions. Yes, that is the one benefit. So use whatever you accumulated here for that benefit, for that type of benefit. Then worthwhile. Yes, then life becomes really worthwhile. Okay, so thank you so, so much. And I see you next week.
Thank you. Thank you, Venerable Kalden. Thank you, everybody. See you all.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much. See you on Tuesday. Thank you. Bye.